Hello and welcome back guys. Today we are starting a new story titled Survival Island, written by Death12976. Please check the link in the description, and let's start. Chapter 1, The Gauntlet is thrown. The air in the Class 1A common room crackled with a tension thicker than Bakugo's nitroglycerin sweat. It had started innocently enough, a post-training debrief that devolved into the usual boisterous arguments about whose techniques were superior. But today, a sharper edge had crept into the girls' voices. Honestly, Momo Yaoyorozu had sighed, adjusting her intricate collar. Sometimes it feels like we're constantly having to pick up the pieces. Yeah. Mina Ashido chimed in, her pink skin practically vibrating with energy. Like, we come up with these awesome strategies, and then boom. Someone just charges in without thinking. She gestured vaguely, and while no names were explicitly mentioned, several pairs of male eyes narrowed. Eijiro Kirishima, ever the stalwart defender of his bros, stood up, his hardening quirk activating slightly. Hey. We think things through too. Sometimes you just gotta be manly and take action. Manly and reckless are two very different things, Kirishima, Tsuyu Azui pointed out with her usual unflappable demeanor, her large eyes observing the escalating tension. The argument spiraled from there, a whirlwind of pointed remarks and defensive retorts. The girls voiced their frustrations about feeling unheard, about plans being disregarded in favor of impulsive actions. The boys countered with accusations of the girls being overly cautious, of overthinking to the point of inaction. Izuku Midoriya, who had initially tried to mediate with his usual nervous energy, found himself increasingly sidelined. He listened intently, absorbing the undercurrents of frustration on both sides. He saw the genuine annoyance in the girls' eyes, a weariness that went beyond the usual training rivalries. He also understood the boys' pride, their feeling of being undervalued despite their efforts and the times their raw power had indeed saved the day. Then came the comment that truly ignited the spark. It was Jairu, her voice usually laced with a cool detachment, who delivered the perceived blow. Honestly, sometimes you guys just feel useless. All brawn and no brain. A collective gasp rippled through the boys. Even Bakugo, who usually thrived on provocation, seemed momentarily stunned into silence, a dangerous stillness settling over him. Kirishima's hardening became more pronounced, and Denki Kaminari's usually goofy grin vanished. Izuku, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. His voice, though still carrying a hint of its usual nervousness, held a new, firm resonance that cut through the charged atmosphere. Useless, he repeated, his green eyes, usually wide with apprehension, now focused with an uncharacteristic intensity. He pushed his glasses up his nose, a familiar gesture that somehow felt different this time, imbued with a newfound resolve. He took a step forward, his gaze sweeping across the assembled girls. Have you truly thought things through? He began, his voice gaining strength with each word. How many times have meticulously crafted plans fallen apart because of unforeseen circumstances you didn't account for? He didn't wait for an answer. How often has hesitation, a fear of injury, held you back in crucial moments? How many times have you relied solely on the raw power of your quirks, neglecting the fundamental strength of your own bodies? His gaze lingered on a few of them. What happens when your quirk is nullified? What then? We've trained our bodies, pushed past our limits physically. If our quirks fail, we can still fight, still protect. Can you honestly say the same? He shifted his focus, his voice hardening slightly. And plans. You speak of plans. How often are strategies proposed, only to be dismissed or half-heartedly followed because of what? A feeling. An intuition that isn't rooted in logical assessment. He recalled the countless training exercises, the simulated villain attacks where meticulously laid out plans crumbled due to a lack of flexibility or a refusal to adapt. He remembered times when the girls, powerful as they were, had hesitated, allowing villains to gain the upper hand. He thought of the times when the boys, perhaps less tactically inclined initially, had relied on their sheer willpower and physical resilience to salvage a situation. How many times, Izuku continued, his voice unwavering, have we had to resort to brute force, to sheer physical endurance, to ensure everyone's safety because a well-laid plan faltered? Because hesitation cost precious seconds. Because relying solely on a quirk left you vulnerable. The common room was silent now, the girl's initial indignation replaced by a stunned stillness. Izuku's words, delivered with an unexpected conviction, hung heavy in the air. He wasn't shouting, wasn't being aggressive in the way Bakugo often was, but his words carried a weight of observation and frustrated understanding. He took a deep breath, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he finally voiced the thoughts that had been brewing within him. If we are truly useless without our quirks, let's test that. Let's test all of us. His gaze turned towards the door, a determined glint in his eyes. I'm going to speak to Principal Nizu. I'm going to propose a challenge. A training exercise unlike any we've done before. True to his word, Izuku sought out the principal. Nizu, perched in his usual spot behind his oversized desk, listened with keen interest as Izuku, surprisingly articulate and resolute, laid out his proposal. He explained the underlying tension within the class, the accusations leveled against the boys, and his own counterarguments. Therefore, Principal Nizu, Izuku concluded, bowing slightly, I propose a survival challenge. One where quirks are nullified, forcing us to rely solely on our physical abilities, our intellect, and our teamwork. Nizu's beady eyes gleamed with intrigue. Quirk nullification, you say? An interesting proposition, Midoriya-kun. It would certainly test a different set of skills. Yes, sir, Izuku affirmed. And to make it a true test of group dynamics and independent survival, I propose separating the class. The boys on one island, the girls on another. He then described the scenario he had envisioned, inspired by a documentary he had once watched, two groups, isolated, with only their wits and physical capabilities to ensure their survival. Nizu steepled his paws, a thoughtful expression on his face. And what would be the objective, Midoriya-kun? Survival, sir, Izuku replied. To see which group can best secure resources, establish shelter, and ultimately, thrive in a challenging environment without relying on their quirks. Nizu chuckled softly. A rather direct approach to resolving interpersonal conflict, wouldn't you say? Perhaps, sir, Izuku admitted. But I believe it would be a valuable learning experience for everyone. To understand our strengths beyond our quirks, and perhaps, to gain a new perspective on each other's capabilities. After a moment of contemplation, Nizu's grin widened. Very well, Midoriya-kun. I find your proposal compelling. We shall proceed with this exercise. The staff and I, along with a few interested parties, will observe your progress. The news of the challenge spread through Class 1A like wildfire. The girls, initially taken aback by Izuku's sharp retort, were now a mixture of apprehension and determination. They were not used to being challenged in this way, especially not by the usually meek Midoriya. The boys, on the other hand, felt a surge of vindication and a renewed sense of purpose. This was their chance to prove their worth beyond their flashy quirks. The logistics were swiftly put into place. Two uninhabited islands, similar in size and terrain, lush, tropical environments ringed by sandy beaches and teeming with potential resources, were selected. Quirk-canceling bracelets, developed by Power Loader, were distributed. They were sleek, metallic bands that, once activated, would suppress the user's quirk entirely. As the day of the deployment arrived, a palpable tension hung in the air. The students gathered at the training grounds, where a large screen displayed the live feeds from multiple cameras already positioned across both islands. The UA staff, along with the Wild Pussycats, Mirko, Ryukyu, and Nijire Hado, were present in the observation room, their expressions ranging from professional interest to barely concealed excitement. Eri and Koda were also there, perched on a small sofa, their eyes wide with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. As Izuku passed Eri, she tugged on his sleeve, her horn glowing faintly. Be careful, Papa, she whispered, her voice filled with concern. Koda, standing slightly behind her, mumbled, "Yeah, be careful, Dad." His cheeks flushed a light pink as he avoided Izuku's gaze. A ripple of surprise went through the observers. The wild pussycats exchanged wide-eyed glances, while Mirko's ears twitched. Ryukyu's usually stoic expression softened slightly, and Nijire's curiosity spiked. "Papa. Dad." Mandalay murmured, looking at Pixie Bob with a bewildered expression. Pixie Bob giggled, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Looks like our little Deku has quite the fan club." She then playfully nudged Kota. "So, Kota-chan, you call him Dad too? That's so cute." Kota's blush deepened, and he ducked his head further. Eri, however, stood her ground. "He is my papa," she declared firmly, glaring slightly at Kota. "He's my dad." Kota retorted, finally meeting her gaze with a hint of defiance. A small, comical squabble ensued between the two children, each insisting on their claim. Izuku, his face a mask of flustered embarrassment, knelt down and gently placed a hand on each of their heads. "You're both very important to me," he stammered, his cheeks still flushed. The observers watched this exchange with a mixture of shock and amusement. Midnight fanned herself dramatically. Well, Midoriya-kun. You certainly have a way with the youngsters." Ryukyu simply nodded, a thoughtful look on her face. Mirko let out a low whistle, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Nijire, ever the inquisitive one, leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. As the students were separated into two groups and led towards the transport helicopters, the initial tension from the common room had morphed into a focused determination. The boys, with Izuku's quiet but firm leadership, huddled together, exchanging determined nods. The girls, after a moment of initial disarray, also began to organize, a sense of competitive spirit hardening their resolve. On the boys' transport, Izuku addressed them, his voice calm but resolute. "All right, everyone. We need to work together. Quirks are out. We need to focus on our physical strength, our knowledge, and our teamwork. Let's show them what we're truly capable of." Meanwhile, on the girls' transport, an air of fierce independence prevailed. While Momo, with her analytical mind, tried to take a leadership role, a cacophony of voices often drowned her out. Each girl, confident in her own abilities, seemed to have her own ideas about the best course of action. As the helicopters descended towards their respective islands, the students braced themselves. The challenge had begun. The cameras scattered across the islands whirred to life, ready to capture every moment of their survival. The observers in the control room settled in, a sense of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. This was more than just a training exercise, it was a test of pride, resilience, and the very definition of what it meant to be a hero, quirk or no quirk. Chapter 2, Island Beginnings and Divergent Paths. The roar of the departing helicopters faded, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake. The boys of Class 1A found themselves on a pristine stretch of beach, the turquoise water lapping gently at the white sand. Lush vegetation crowded the interior of the island, promising both resources and potential dangers. Izuku, despite the tremor of anxiety that always accompanied new and uncertain situations, took a deep breath and surveyed their surroundings. He knew they couldn't afford to waste time. The sun was already climbing higher, and the need for shelter, water, and food would become critical quickly. "All right, everyone," he said, his voice clear and surprisingly steady. "We need to prioritize. First, shelter. We need something to protect us from the elements, especially if it rains or gets cold at night." He gestured towards the tree line. "There looks like there are plenty of sturdy branches and possibly some broad leaves we can use." Kirishima, ever the eager beaver, pumped his fist. "Right on, Midoriya. Shelter first. Let's show them what manly construction looks like." Second, Izuku continued, ignoring Kirishima's enthusiastic outburst, "Water. We can't rely on finding fresh water immediately. We'll need to collect seawater and boil it to make it drinkable. We'll need containers for that and a way to build a fire. Kaminari, looking slightly less confident without his electrifying quirk, scratched his head. Fire without sparks, that's gonna be tricky. We can do it the old-fashioned way, Izuku explained, his mind already racing through the survival manuals he had devoured over the years. Friction. We'll need dry wood and a lot of patience. And food. Zero added, his tape dispensers conspicuously absent from his elbows. My stomach's already rumbling. Crabs, Izuku said, pointing towards the rocky outcrops at the edge of the beach. There are likely crabs in the shallows. They're a good source of protein. We can try to catch some. He then began assigning tasks. Kirishima, you and Sato, your strength will be invaluable for gathering large branches for the shelter frame. Kaminari, you and Shoji, try to find dry tinder, leaves, bark, anything that will catch fire easily. Zero, you and Ojiro, focus on finding sturdy, broad leaves for the shelter roofing. Bakugo, Izuku hesitated slightly, then met the explosive blonde's gaze. Can you help me scout the shoreline for potential containers and also keep an eye out for any immediate dangers? Bakugo grunted, his usual scowl firmly in place, but surprisingly, he didn't object. TCH, don't think you're the boss, Deku. Just don't screw this up. He then stalked off towards the rocks, his keen eyes scanning the environment. With tasks assigned, the boys sprang into action, a sense of purpose driving them. Izuku, despite his lack of a powerful quirk, moved with a quiet efficiency, demonstrating a surprising level of practical knowledge. He showed Kaminari and Shoji how to identify the driest tinder, guided Kirishima and Sato on selecting the strongest branches, and helped Zero and Ojiro identify the best leaves for waterproofing. Hours passed in a flurry of activity. The rhythmic scraping of wood against wood filled the air as Izuku patiently worked on starting a fire, his brow furrowed in concentration. Kirishima and Sato returned with an impressive collection of sturdy branches, which they began lashing together under Izuku's direction, creating a basic A-frame structure. Zero and Ojiro diligently gathered large, overlapping leaves, while Kaminari and Shoji presented a small but promising pile of dry tinder. Bakugo returned with several large, smooth stones that could serve as makeshift containers. By late afternoon, they had a rudimentary shelter taking shape, a small fire crackling merrily, and several crabs roasting over the flames, their shells turning a delicious shade of orange. The boys, tired but satisfied, shared the meager meal, a sense of camaraderie growing amongst them. Izuku, despite his initial nervousness, felt a surge of quiet pride in their collective effort. Meanwhile, on the girls' island, the atmosphere was markedly different. Upon arrival, there was a flurry of excited chatter and a sense of collective leadership. Okay, girls. Mina declared, striking a confident pose. Let's figure out what we need to do first. I think shelter is the most important, Momo stated, adjusting her glasses. We need to assess the available materials and design something efficient. But what about exploring? Toru Hagakure's disembodied voice chimed in. Maybe there are some cool things on the island. And we need to find some cute shells. Achiko added, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. This could be like a fun camping trip. Jairu, leaning against a palm tree, crossed her arms. Fun. We're stranded on a deserted island with no quirks. This isn't some beach vacation. Don't be such a downer, Jairu. Mina retorted. We'll be fine. We're all super strong and smart. As the initial excitement wore off, a subtle power struggle began to emerge. Several of the girls, used to taking charge in different situations, vied for leadership. Momo's logical approach was often overshadowed by Mina's impulsive suggestions or Achiko's more optimistic but less practical ideas. I think we should head inland, Tsuyu suggested calmly. There might be a source of fresh water there. But what if there are dangerous animals? Hagakure countered, a hint of fear in her voice. We can handle it. Mina declared confidently, striking another pose. We're heroes in training. Hours passed with a lot of discussion but little concrete action. They wandered along the beach, collecting interesting shells and pointing out pretty flowers. Momo attempted to organize a search party for building materials, but the group quickly fragmented, with some girls more interested in exploring than gathering resources. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the beach, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They had no shelter, no fire, and no reliable source of water or food. A sense of unease started to creep into their conversations. "Maybe we should have focused on shelter first," Ochiko said, her earlier enthusiasm waning. "Yeah, but finding a cool cave would have been way better," Mina argued. Momo sighed, rubbing her temples. "We need a plan. A cohesive plan that everyone agrees on and follows." "Well, someone should have taken charge," Jiraiya muttered, shooting a pointed look at the general direction of Mina and Ochiko. The lack of a clear leader and a unified strategy was becoming increasingly apparent. While the boys on their island were working diligently on their basic needs, the girls were still largely in the planning and feeling out stage, their initial confidence slowly giving way to a growing sense of disquiet. In the observation room, the UA staff watched the contrasting progress with varying degrees of concern and intrigue. Midoriya-kun seems to have a natural aptitude for this kind of situation, Aizawa commented, his usual stoic expression betraying a hint of surprise. "He's organized, resourceful, and surprisingly assertive." "Indeed," Nizu chirped, his eyes glued to the screen showing the boys sharing their meager meal. "The lack of quirk seems to have leveled the playing field in an unexpected way. Raw power isn't the deciding factor here." The wild pussycats exchanged worried glances as they watched the girls' disorganized efforts. "They're relying too much on their initial confidence," Mandalay murmured. "They need to focus on the essentials." Mirko snorted, her ears twitching. "Bunch of amateurs. Talking about their feelings instead of building a DMN fire." Ryukyu nodded in agreement. "They need a clear leader and a sense of urgency." Nijire, however, saw a different dynamic. "It's interesting how differently they're approaching this. The boys seem to have fallen into a more hierarchical structure with Izuku leading, while the girls are more democratic, in a chaotic sort of way." Eri, nestled between Aizawa and present Mike, frowned at the screen showing the girls. "They look lost, Papa." Koda, sitting quietly beside her, nodded in agreement. "They're not doing anything." The contrast between the two islands was stark. One group, under the quiet but effective leadership of Izuku, was making steady progress in securing their basic needs. The other, hampered by a lack of clear direction and a tendency towards prioritizing exploration and emotional processing over practical tasks, was facing a potentially difficult first night. The survival challenge was proving to be more than just a test of physical and mental fortitude. It was a revealing examination of their individual strengths, weaknesses, and their ability to function as a team without the crutch of their extraordinary abilities. The drama, as requested, was unfolding not in fiery confrontations, but in the quiet struggle for survival and the contrasting approaches of two groups facing the same daunting challenge. Chapter 3, Nightfall and Growing Tensions. As darkness descended upon the islands, the contrast between the boys' and girls' situations became even more pronounced. On the boys' island, the flickering light of a roaring bonfire danced across their faces, casting long shadows that moved with the crackling flames. The warmth was a welcome relief against the cooling night air. They had managed to construct a relatively sturdy shelter, a lean-to built against a cluster of sturdy trees, providing protection from the elements. Izuku, his face illuminated by the firelight, carefully turned several crabs roasting on sharpened sticks. The aroma of cooked seafood filled the air, a tantalizing promise after a long day of hard LBR. Kaminari, surprisingly adept at maintaining the fire, added more fuel to the flames, while Sato and Kurishima reinforced the shelter walls with additional branches. "These crabs are amazing, Midoriya," Siro exclaimed, devouring his portion with gusto. "You're a lifesaver, man." "It's nothing," Izuku replied, a faint blush warming his cheeks. Just basic survival skills. My mom used to take me camping. Bakugo, sitting slightly apart from the group, grunted in acknowledgement. Even he seemed to appreciate the warmth and the food, though he would never admit it openly. We should try fishing tomorrow, Ojiro suggested, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. There were some fish in the shallows earlier. Good idea, Izuku agreed. We can try making some spears. Shoji, your dupli arms could be really useful for that. Shoji nodded, his multiple arms flexing slightly. I can find some straight branches and sharpen them into points. The boys settled into a comfortable routine, sharing stories and laughter around the fire. A sense of camaraderie had blossomed, forged in the shared struggle for survival. Even Bakugo, despite his gruff exterior, seemed to be drawn into the group dynamic, his explosive temper tempered by the necessity of cooperation. Their success in establishing shelter, fire, and food had boosted their morale. They felt a sense of accomplishment, a tangible proof of their resilience and resourcefulness without relying on their quirks. Meanwhile, on the girls' island, the mood was significantly more somber. The setting sun had plunged them into darkness, and the lack of fire created an oppressive sense of vulnerability. They huddled together on the beach, shivering in the rapidly cooling air. Their earlier attempts at organization had crumbled into disarray. The lack of a clear leader and the conflicting opinions had resulted in minimal progress. They had no shelter, no fire, and no food. The initial excitement had been replaced by a growing sense of anxiety and frustration. I'm freezing, Achiko whimpered, wrapping her arms around herself. I wish we had a blanket or something. We should have focused on shelter first, Momo said, her voice laced with regret. I tried to tell everyone, but, well, someone should have taken charge. Jairu snapped, her patience wearing thin. We're just wandering around aimlessly. Don't blame me. Mina retorted, her pink skin darkening slightly. I was just trying to have fun. The argument escalated, with accusations flying and tempers flaring. The lack of basic necessities had frayed their nerves, and the close proximity in the darkness only amplified their frustrations. This is all pointless. Hagakure exclaimed, her voice trembling. We should just give up. Tsuyu, ever the voice of reason, tried to mediate. Let's calm down, everyone. We can still figure this out. We just need to work together. But her words fell on deaf ears. The girls, exhausted, hungry, and cold, were trapped in a cycle of blame and recrimination. The lack of a unified strategy and the inability to effectively communicate had created a rift within the group. In the observation room, the UA staff and guests watched the contrasting situations unfold with a mixture of concern and fascination. The difference is striking, Nizu mused, sipping his tea. Midori Yakuin's leadership has been surprisingly effective. He's organized, decisive, and he seems to have a knack for motivating others. Aizawa nodded in agreement. He's always had a strong analytical mind. It's finally being put to good use in a practical setting. The wild pussycats, however, were deeply concerned about the girls' predicament. They're falling apart, Mandalay said, her voice filled with worry. They need guidance, a strong hand to pull them together. Pixie Bob sighed. They're too used to relying on their quirks. They haven't developed the basic survival skills that the boys seem to possess. Mirko snorted. Bunch of whiners. They need to toughen up. Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed Momo's attempts to lead. Yaoyorozu-san has the intelligence and the vision, but she lacks the assertiveness to command respect in this situation. Nijire, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, focused on the interpersonal dynamics. It's interesting how their personalities are clashing. The boys seem to have found a natural hierarchy, while the girls are struggling with a more egalitarian, but ultimately ineffective, approach. The focus shifted to Eri and Koda, who were watching the screens intently. Eri, her horn glowing faintly, tugged on Aizawa's sleeve. Papa looks so strong, she whispered, her voice filled with admiration as she watched Izuku tending to the fire. Koda, standing beside her, nodded in agreement. Yeah, Dad's really cool. He then blushed and looked away, avoiding eye contact with the adults. The UA staff exchanged surprised glances. They're really attached to him, Present Mike said, his voice unusually subdued. Midnight fanned herself dramatically. Our little Midoriya has quite the paternal instinct, it seems. Snipe chuckled. The kid's got a good heart. He's always been protective of those two. Nizu, however, saw a deeper significance in their words. It's more than just protectiveness, he mused. There's a genuine emotional bond there. It's touching, in a way. The contrast between the two islands continued to widen. The boys, fueled by their success and strengthened by their camaraderie, were thriving in the challenging environment. The girls, hampered by their disorganization and fractured relationships, were struggling to survive. The survival challenge, intended to be a test of skill and resilience, was also revealing the complex dynamics of their personalities and their ability to function as a team under pressure. The drama was not just in the external challenges of the island, but in the internal struggles of the students themselves. Chapter 4, Organization vs. Chaos, Fire vs. Raw. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, signaling the start of another day on the islands. On the boys' side, a sense of purposeful activity filled the air. Izuku, already awake and tending to the embers of the previous night's fire, was organizing the day's tasks. Okay, everyone, he said, his voice clear and authoritative. We've established our basic needs, but we need to refine our efforts to make things more sustainable. He then outlined his plan, dividing the boys into specialized groups. Kirishima, Sato, and Ojiro, you're the building crew. We need to improve our shelter, make it more weatherproof and comfortable. Shiro, Kaminari, and Shoji, you're the hunting party. We need to find a more reliable source of food than just crabs. See if you can find any small game inland. Bakugo, you're with me on the scouting and fishing team. We need to explore the island further and refine our fishing techniques. I've seen some promising spots further down the coast. Tokoyami and Koda, you're the scavenging group. Look for anything useful, vines, potential tools, anything that can make our lives easier. Mineta, you're on water collection. We need a more efficient way to gather and purify water. And finally, Ida, you're the cooking team. Make sure we have everything ready when the others return. The boys listened attentively, nodding in agreement. Each group set off with a clear purpose, their movements coordinated and efficient. Izuku, working alongside Bakugo, felt a sense of quiet satisfaction as he watched his plan unfold. The fishing team, equipped with sharpened spears and a makeshift net woven from vines, ventured further down the coast, their eyes scanning the water for signs of fish. The hunting party disappeared into the dense vegetation, their senses heightened, searching for any movement or sign of prey. The building crew worked diligently on reinforcing the shelter, their movements synchronized and purposeful. By late afternoon, the groups began to return, their efforts bearing fruit. The hunting party returned with several small birds and a rabbit, their faces beaming with pride. The fishing team brought back a bountiful haul of fish, their spears stained with scales. The scavenging group presented a collection of useful vines, smooth stones, and large leaves that could be used for various purposes. As the sun began to set, the boys gathered around the crackling bonfire, sharing their spoils and their stories of the day. The atmosphere was one of camaraderie and accomplishment. They had faced the challenges of the island head-on, and through their collective effort and Izuku's leadership, they were thriving. On the girls' island, the day unfolded in a much less structured manner. After another cold and uncomfortable night, the girls woke up with a renewed sense of urgency, but their attempts at organization remained chaotic. Okay, we really need to get our act together, Momo declared, trying to assert some leadership. We need to divide tasks and work efficiently. However, her suggestions were met with a chorus of conflicting opinions. I want to explore. Mina exclaimed, her energy undeterred by the previous night's discomfort. Maybe there's a cool waterfall somewhere. I think we should focus on shelter, Ochiko countered. That little lean-to we built yesterday wasn't nearly enough. But fire is the most important. Hagakure insisted, shivering. We need warmth and cooked food. The girls argued back and forth, unable to reach a consensus. Eventually, they settled on a loose agreement to share the leadership role, a decision that proved to be ineffective in practice. Okay, I guess we can all decide what we want to do, Mina suggested, herding everyone towards the tree line. But let's meet back here later, okay? The girls dispersed, each pursuing their own interests. Some attempted to gather materials for a better shelter, but their efforts were disorganized and lacked direction. Others wandered along the beach, searching for food. A few, including Mina, ventured inland, driven by their curiosity rather than a practical need. By late afternoon, some of the girls had managed to catch a few fish in the shallows, but without fire, they were forced to eat them raw. The taste was unpleasant, and their stomachs rumbled with unsatisfied hunger. They huddled together, sharing their meager catch and their growing frustration. This is awful, Toru complained, her voice echoing from her invisible form. I'm so cold and hungry. I wish we had a fire, Ochiko sighed, her earlier enthusiasm completely gone. Raw fish is disgusting. We should have made someone responsible for fire, Jairu grumbled. But no, everyone wanted to be in charge. They then began to speculate about the boys' progress. I bet the boys are doing even worse than us, Mina said, trying to boost their spirits. They're probably just sitting around, arguing. Yeah, Ochiko agreed. They're probably all hungry and cold too. They probably haven't even caught any fish, Hagakure added. They're so useless without their quirks. Unbeknownst to them, the boys were enjoying a hearty meal of roasted fish and grilled rabbit, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the bonfire. In the observation room, the UA staff and guests watched the contrasting situations with a mixture of amusement, concern, and a growing sense of dramatic irony. The boys' organization is remarkable, Nizu commented, his eyes twinkling. Midoriya-kun's leadership has been instrumental in their success. Aizawa nodded in agreement. He's demonstrated an unexpected level of strategic thinking and resourcefulness. They're actually thriving, Present Mike added, his voice filled with surprise. I didn't think they had this in them. The wild pussycats, however, were still worried about the girls. They're so disorganized, Mandalay sighed. They need a leader, someone to take charge. They're too focused on their feelings and not enough on practicalities, Pixie Bob added, shaking her head. Mirko snorted. They're wasting time talking instead of doing. That's their problem. Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed the girls' interactions. Their insistence on shared leadership is hindering their progress. They lack a clear direction and a unified strategy. Nijire, ever the insightful one, focused on the underlying dynamics. It's interesting how their communication styles differ. The boys are direct and task-oriented, while the girls are more emotionally driven, which can be both a strength and a weakness. The big three also had their own observations. Midoriya-senpai is amazing. Mirio exclaimed, his enthusiasm undeterred by the seriousness of the situation. He's so organized and efficient. He's really stepped up, Tamaki agreed, his voice quiet but sincere. He's always been smart, but I didn't realize he was this capable. Nijire giggled. He's like a completely different person out there. So confident and in charge. The camera then focused on Eri and Koda, who were watching the screens intently. Eri, her horn glowing softly, pointed at Izuku. Papa is so good at everything, she exclaimed, her voice filled with pride. Koda nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly. Yeah, Dad's the best. The adults in the room exchanged knowing glances, their expressions a mixture of amusement and warmth. The bond between Izuku and the two children was undeniable, a testament to his kind heart and his natural ability to care for others. The day ended with the boys enjoying a delicious meal and the warmth of the fire, while the girls huddled together in the darkness, their stomachs rumbling and their spirits low. The survival challenge continued to highlight the stark differences in their approaches and the dramatic consequences of their choices. Chapter 5, Trophies, Tribalism, and Troubled Tides. The boys' island had transformed into a testament to their ingenuity and teamwork. The initial lean-to had evolved into a more substantial structure, reinforced with woven branches and waterproofed with large leaves. A dedicated cooking area, complete with a makeshift oven built from stones, ensured their food was cooked to perfection. A steady supply of fresh water was collected in large, hollowed-out gourds, purified by boiling it over the ever-present fire. Izuku, despite his initial apprehension, had embraced his role as leader with a quiet confidence. He delegated tasks efficiently, guided his team with his extensive knowledge of survival techniques, and fostered a sense of camaraderie that bound them together. "All right, everyone," he announced one morning, his voice carrying across the camp. "We've been working hard. Today, let's take a break. A day to relax, to do what we enjoy." A cheer went up from the boys, their faces beaming with relief. Some opted to swim in the crystal-clear waters, their laughter echoing across the beach. Others explored the island, their curiosity piqued by the lush surroundings. A small group, led by Izuku, ventured deeper inland, their eyes scanning the terrain for potential resources. They stumbled upon a swamp, its murky waters teeming with life. A massive crocodile, its scales gleaming in the sunlight, basked lazily on a muddy bank. "Whoa," Kaminari breathed, his eyes wide with awe. "That's huge." "We could catch it," Izuku said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Like they do in those survival shows." The boys exchanged excited glances. A hunt. A chance to prove their skills and provide a substantial meal. They devised a plan, using their spears and their combined strength to corner the massive reptile. After a tense struggle, they managed to subdue the crocodile, its powerful jaws snapping in frustration. A triumphant roar erupted from the boys as they dragged their prize back to camp. They expertly butchered the animal, savoring the thought of the feast to come. The meat was carefully prepared for cooking, while the skin was stretched out to dry. As a symbolic gesture, they boiled the skull of the crocodile, cleaning it meticulously. They then crafted it into a fearsome mask, a trophy of their hunt and a symbol of their dems over the island. With a shared glance, they presented the mask to Izuku, their leader, their protector. Izuku, initially taken aback by the gesture, accepted the mask with a mixture of pride and humility. He understood the significance of the offering, a testament to their trust in him and their collective achievement. He donned the mask, its hollow eyes staring out from his face, transforming him into a tribal warrior, a symbol of their newfound identity. The boys, emboldened by their success, decided to commemorate their achievements. They constructed a makeshift shrine, adorned with colorful flowers and carefully arranged stones. It was a light-hearted gesture, a way to celebrate their survival and their growing bond. "We should also look for some sharp rocks," Ojiro suggested. "We can make stone tools. Axes, knives, and what about the crocodile skin?" Siro added. "We can make something out of that." "A robe!" Kaminari exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "We can make a robe for Izuku. He's our leader, he deserves it." The idea was met with enthusiastic approval. The boys set to work, meticulously crafting a robe from the crocodile skin, its rough texture a symbol of their hard-won survival. On the girls' island, the situation continued to deteriorate. They remained disorganized, their efforts fragmented and ineffective. The lack of fire plagued them, forcing them to eat raw fish and endure the chilly nights. Their attempts at building a decent shelter had failed, resulting in a flimsy structure that offered little protection from the elements. Their conversations were filled with blame and recrimination, their initial confidence replaced by a growing sense of despair. They refused to change their approach, clinging to their chaotic, shared leadership model, even as it led them further into trouble. This is hopeless, Ochiko lamented, shivering in the pre-dawn chill. We're going to die here. It's not hopeless. Mina retorted, though her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. We just need to try harder. We've been trying. Jairu snapped. But nothing is working. We're useless without our quirks. The girl's words, filled with self-doubt and frustration, echoed across the desolate beach. In the observation room, the atmosphere was thick with tension and dramatic irony. The boys have completely embraced their new reality, Nizu observed, his eyes gleaming with fascination. Their tribalistic tendencies are intriguing. Aizawa sighed. They're getting carried away. That crocodile mask, it's a bit much. Present Mike, however, was impressed. They're thriving. They're resourceful, they're organized, and they're having fun. They're like a well-oiled machine. The wild pussycats were horrified by the girl's predicament. They're falling apart, Mandalay said, her voice filled with despair. They're giving up. They're too stubborn to admit they need help, Pixie Bob added, shaking her head. They're going to get themselves killed. Mirko, however, found a strange sense of dark amusement in their struggles. They're getting what they deserve, she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. They thought they were so superior. Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed the girls' interactions with a mixture of pity and frustration. Their pride is their downfall, she said. They refuse to adapt, to learn from their mistakes. Nijire, however, was fascinated by the psychological aspect of the situation. It's amazing how differently they're reacting to the stress, she said. The boys have embraced a more primal, instinctual approach, while the girls are trapped in their own heads, their emotions hindering their ability to function. The big three were equally captivated by the unfolding drama. Midoriya-senpai looks so cool with that mask. Mirio exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He's like a warrior king. He's intimidating, Tamaki mumbled, his voice barely audible. But impressive. Nijire giggled, her cheeks flushed. He looks so badass, she exclaimed, her eyes fixed on the screen showing Izuku surveying his domain, the crocodile skull mask perched atop his head. All Might, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and concern. Young Midoriya, he's always had a strong sense of justice and a longing to protect others. But this is a side of him I've never seen before. The female heroes in the room, particularly Midnight, Ryukyu, and even Mirko, found themselves inexplicably drawn to Izuku's new, primal persona. The mask, the robe, the quiet confidence, it was a stark contrast to the meek and nervous boy they knew, and it stirred something within them, a primal attraction to his strength and his newfound depths. Eri, watching the screen with wide eyes, tugged on Aizawa's sleeve. Papa looks so strong and cool, she exclaimed, her voice filled with awe. Kota, standing beside her, nodded in agreement, his cheeks flushed. Yeah, Dad's the best. The survival challenge, initially intended as a test of skill and resilience, had become a dramatic exploration of human nature, a clash of contrasting approaches, and a revealing examination of the students' true selves. The boys, driven by their instincts and guided by Izuku's leadership, were thriving in their newfound tribalism. The girls, trapped by their pride and their inability to cooperate, were facing a descent into despair. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a clash of cultures that would determine their survival and their understanding of themselves. Chapter 6, The Offering, the Plea, and the Prize. The relative calm of the islands was shattered by the buzzing drone that descended from the sky, its mechanical were cutting through the sounds of the waves and the rustling leaves. A small speaker attached to the drone crackled to life, and Principal Nizu's cheerful voice filled the air. Greetings, students, he announced, his tone surprisingly chipper despite the gravity of their situation. I hope you are all adapting well to your temporary accommodations. Now, I have a proposition for you. A chance to improve your circumstances. The students on both islands paused, their activities forgotten as they listened intently. Even the bickering on the girls' island ceased, replaced by a flicker of hope. Each group will have 10 minutes to compile a list of supplies you longing, Nizu continued. However, there's a catch. Your request will be judged based on its presentation. A bland or unimpressive offering may yield meager results. A creative and compelling display, on the other hand, could earn you a bounty beyond your wildest dreams. A murmur of excitement rippled through both groups. This was a chance to escape their hardships, to acquire comforts and tools that would make their survival significantly easier. The 10-minute countdown began, and the students scrambled to prepare their offerings. On the boys' island, a flurry of organized activity erupted. Izuku, still adorned in his crocodile skull mask and robe, directed his team with his usual efficiency. "All right, everyone, let's make this count," he declared, his voice ringing with determination. "We need to showcase our progress, our resourcefulness, and our artistic flair." The boys worked together seamlessly, their movements practiced and coordinated. They gathered their most impressive achievements, arranging them in a display that spoke volumes about their survival skills. For large gourds, filled to the brim with crystal-clear water, were placed prominently. A substantial pile of roasted crocodile meat, enough to feed them for days, was carefully arranged on large leaves. Baskets overflowing with berries and a variety of cooked fish and crabs completed the culinary offering. But it was the presentation that truly set their display apart. The boys had constructed a magnificent shrine, a testament to their creativity and their newfound tribal identity. The shrine, built from intricately woven branches and adorned with colorful flowers, stood as a symbol of their resilience and their unity. Torches, fueled by animal fat, flickered around the shrine, casting an ethereal glow on their offerings. Izuku, the focal point of their display, stood proudly before the shrine, the crocodile skull mask adding to his imposing presence. The boys, their faces smeared with tribal markings made from charcoal and berry juice, stood behind him, their expressions a mixture of pride and anticipation. "This is it," Izuku said, his voice low but firm. "This is our offering. This is what we've accomplished." The 10 minutes elapsed, and the drone hovered above them, its camera whirring as it captured their impressive display. On the girls' island, the atmosphere was significantly more chaotic. Their attempts at organization were hampered by their ongoing disagreements and their lack of a unified vision. They managed to gather a single bottle of rainwater, its murky contents a stark contrast to the boys' abundant supply. A handful of fish, barely enough to feed them all, lay scattered on the sand. Their offering lacked the abundance, the craftsmanship, and the sheer spectacle of the boys' display. Their list of requests, scribbled hastily on a large leaf, reflected their priorities. Phone new clothes make up the 10 minutes ended, and the drone recorded their meager offering, its camera capturing their disarray and their lack of preparation. Back in the observation room, the UA staff, the pro heroes, the big three, and even Eri and Kota watched the events unfold with rapt attention. "My goodness," Nizu exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. "The boys, they've created a veritable masterpiece. Midoriya-kun's leadership is truly extraordinary." Aizawa, though still maintaining his stoic demeanor, couldn't help but be impressed. "They've adapted remarkably well. Their teamwork, their resourcefulness, it's commendable." Present Mike was practically bouncing with excitement. "Look at that display. It's like something out of a movie. They've gone full-on tribal. And Midoriya. He looks like a warrior king." The wild pussycats were stunned by the contrast between the two offerings. "The boys, they've built a civilization," Mandalay murmured, her voice filled with awe. "And the girls, they're still struggling to survive. They're so focused on superficial things," Pixie Bob added, shaking her head in disappointment. "A phone. Makeup. Seriously." Mirko, however, found a strange sense of satisfaction in the girls' failure. "They thought they were so superior," she said, a hint of a smirk playing on her lips. "They wanted to be equals. Well, this is equality." Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed the boys' display with a mixture of admiration and unease. "Their tribalistic tendencies are concerning," she said. "But their resourcefulness is undeniable." Nijire, ever the insightful one, focused on the psychological implications of their offerings. "The boys are showing their strength, their unity, their connection to the island," she said. "The girls are showing their vulnerability, their disorganization, their longing for their old lives." The big three were equally captivated by the unfolding drama. "Midoriya-senpai is incredible," Mirio exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "He's like a natural leader. And that mask. So cool." "He's intense," Tamaki mumbled, his voice barely audible. "But impressive. They've accomplished so much." Nijire, however, was completely mesmerized by Izuku's transformation. The crocodile skull mask, the tribal markings, the confident posture, it was a far cry from the shy and nervous boy she knew. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and her heart pounded in her chest. "He looks so different," she whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. "So powerful." The other female heroes in the room shared Nijire's reaction. Midnight, Ryukyu, and even Mirko felt a strange pull towards Izuku's newfound primal energy. The mask, the robe, the air of command, it stirred something within them, a primal attraction that they couldn't quite explain. Eri and Koda, watching the screens with wide eyes, were bursting with pride. "Papa is the best," Eri exclaimed, her voice filled with adoration. "He's so strong and smart." Koda nodded, his cheeks flushed. "Yeah, Dad's amazing. They got so much stuff." The drone returned a short while later, its speaker crackling with Nizu's voice once more. "The results are in," he announced, his tone filled with anticipation. "The boys, you have truly impressed us. Your offering was exceptional. Your creativity, your resourcefulness, your teamwork, it was all truly remarkable." A cheer erupted from the boys, their faces beaming with triumph. "Therefore," Nizu continued, "you will receive your requested items. And more." The drone then delivered their rewards, all the iron tools, including an iron knife, iron pickaxe, iron axe, iron hoe, and iron shovel, 3 lighters, 10 pillows and blankets, 4 bows and 20 arrows. The boys erupted into cheers, their excitement echoing across the island. They had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. "And now," Nizu said, his voice shifting to a more somber tone, "the girls, your offering was lacking. Your requests were superficial. Your presentation, well, let's just say it left much to be desired." A collective groan went up from the girls, their faces falling in disappointment. "Therefore," Nizu continued, "you will receive a fraction of your requests." The drone delivered their meager reward, 1 lighter, 7 bags of chips, 9 water bottles. The girls' disappointment was palpable. Their hopes had been dashed, and their situation remained bleak. The contrast between the two groups was stark. The boys, thriving under Izuku's leadership, had earned a bounty of resources that would significantly improve their lives. The girls, still struggling with disorganization and infighting, received a paltry reward that did little to alleviate their suffering. The survival challenge, initially a test of skill and resilience, had become a dramatic illustration of the power of teamwork, the importance of leadership, and the consequences of pride and stubbornness. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a clash of cultures that would determine their ultimate fate. Chapter 7, 6 Days of Transformation and Tribulation. 6 days. 6 days had passed since the drone's DLVRY, 6 days of relentless effort, ingenuity, and a surprising transformation on the boys' island. The landscape had shifted from a simple campsite to a thriving, almost tribal settlement, a testament to their resilience and Izuku's unwavering leadership. The boys had moved their camp deeper into the island's interior, drawn by the promise of greater resources and a more defensible location. They discovered a clearing nestled amidst towering trees, dominated by a cave that burrowed deep into the mountainside. The cave offered natural shelter and a sense of security, becoming the heart of their new home. A massive bonfire, its flames reaching towards the heavens, dominated the clearing, casting an ethereal glow on their new surroundings. The air was filled with the scent of roasted meat, the sounds of laughter, and the rhythmic thud of stone tools against wood. Their hunting expeditions had yielded remarkable success. 9 wild goats had fallen to their spears, providing a bounty of meat that was carefully dried and preserved. The goat skulls, meticulously cleaned and polished, had been transformed into elaborate masks, each one unique and bearing the mark of its creator. Izuku, his collection of small scars a testament to his bravery and leadership, often wore a goat skull mask, its hollow eyes adding to his already imposing presence. He also sported a rugged robe crafted from the goat skins, its warmth and durability a symbol of their hard-won comfort. They had established a small but flourishing farm, cultivating wheat, corn, and carrots in carefully tended plots. Stone spears, sharpened with surprising skill, stood ready for hunting and defense. The goat skins served as warm and comfortable bedding, a luxury they had never imagined possible on the first night. A dedicated kitchen area, complete with a stone oven and a system for storing food, ensured they had a constant supply of nourishing meals. Plans were underway to build a sturdy wooden gate and a watchtower, further solidifying their control over their territory. The shrine, now even more elaborate, stood proudly in the center of the clearing, a testament to their unity and their connection to the island. It was a place of gathering, of celebration, and of quiet reflection. The boys, though still recognizable, had undergone a transformation. They were leaner, stronger, their movements more fluid and confident. They had embraced a primal existence, their bond forged in shared hardship and triumph. "This is incredible," Kaminari said, his voice filled with awe as he surveyed their camp. "We built this. All of this. It's like something out of a movie," Shiro added, his eyes wide with amazement. "We're like survivors." "It's all thanks to Deku," Bakugo grunted, his voice surprisingly devoid of his usual aggression. "He's the only reason we're still alive." "It wasn't just me," Izuku replied, his voice humble but firm. "It was all of us. We worked together. We supported each other." "Yeah, but you led us," Kirishima insisted, clapping Izuku on the back. "You showed us what we were capable of." "We're a team," Izuku said, his gaze sweeping across his companions. "A brotherhood. A manly brotherhood." Kirishima roared, pumping his fist. "We're going to build that gate, right?" Ida asked, his voice filled with determination. "And the watchtower?" "Of course," Izuku replied. "We need to secure our perimeter. We've come too far to lose everything now." "And the skin robes?" Ojiro asked, stroking his own makeshift garment. "Everyone's got one now." "A symbol of our unity," Tokoyami added, his voice resonating with a newfound confidence. "A mark of our tribe." "We should make more tools," Shoji suggested, his multiple arms flexing. "And maybe some weapons." "And explore more of the cave," Koda added, his voice barely audible but firm. "Who knows what's down there?" The boys, their voices filled with purpose and camaraderie, continued to plan and build, their determination fueled by their shared success. On the girls' island, the 6 days had brought only a marginal improvement. They had managed to construct a slightly more substantial shelter, a collection of interconnected lean-tos that offered some protection from the elements. A small fire, painstakingly kindled each day, provided a meager source of warmth and allowed them to cook some of their meager catches. But their progress was slow and fraught with conflict. They still lacked a clear leader, their attempts at shared leadership resulting in constant disagreements and wasted effort. Their conversations were often filled with blame, self-doubt, and a longing for their old lives. They also clung to the delusion that the boys were suffering even more than them. It was a coping mechanism, a way to maintain their pride in the face of their struggles. "At least we have a fire," Ochiko said, shivering as she huddled around the flames. "The boys probably don't even have that." "Yeah," Mina agreed, her voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. "They're probably still eating raw fish. They're probably freezing their butts off," Jairu added, her tone laced with sarcasm. They're so useless without their quirks. We're doing better than them, Momo insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. We're stronger, more adaptable. We just need to work together, Suyu said, her voice calm but firm. We need to stop fighting and start cooperating. But her words fell on deaf ears. The girls, trapped in their cycl of negativity, remained unable to break free from their self-imposed limitations. In the observation room, the UA staff, the pro-heroes, the Big Three, and Eri and Kota watched the contrasting situations unfold with a mixture of awe, concern, and a growing sense of dramatic irony. The boys, they've built a whole new world, Nizu exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. Their resilience, their ingenuity, it's truly remarkable. Aizawa, though still maintaining his stoic demeanor, couldn't help but be impressed. They've adapted to the environment, they've learned to rely on each other, and they've thrived. It's unexpected. Present Mike was practically buzzing with excitement. Look at them. They're like a tribe. They're like warriors. And Midoriya. He's a natural leader. The wild pussycats were stunned by the boys' transformation and deeply concerned about the girls' continued struggles. The boys, they've become something else, Mandalay murmured, her voice filled with awe and a hint of unease. They're strong, they're confident, they're primal. And the girls, Pixie Bob sighed, shaking her head in disappointment. They're still stuck in their old ways. They refuse to change, to adapt. Mirko, however, found a strange sense of dark amusement in the girls' plight. They thought they were so superior, she said, a hint of a smirk playing on her lips. They wanted equality. Well, this is equality. Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed the boys' progress with a mixture of admiration and unease. Their tribalism is fascinating, she said. But I worry about their long-term stability. They're losing their sense of civilization. Nijire, ever the insightful one, focused on the psychological implications of their contrasting journeys. The boys have embraced a more instinctual, collective identity, she said. The girls are clinging to their individual identities, their emotions hindering their ability to function as a unit. The Big Three were equally captivated by the unfolding drama. Midoriya-senpai is a legend. Mirio exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He's like a king. A warrior king. He's intimidating, Tamaki mumbled, his voice barely audible. But impressive. They've accomplished so much. Nijire, however, was completely mesmerized by Izuku's transformation. The scars, the mask, the robe, the air of quiet command, it was a far cry from the shy and nervous boy she knew. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson, and her heart pounded in her chest. He's so different, she whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. So powerful. So attractive. The other female heroes in the room shared Nijire's reaction. Midnight, Ryukyu, and even Mirko felt a strange pull towards Izuku's newfound primal energy. The mask, the robe, the air of Dems, it stirred something within them, a primal attraction that they couldn't quite explain. All Might, his expression a mixture of pride and concern, watched Izuku's transformation with a heavy heart. Young Midoriya, he's always had a hero's heart, he said, his voice filled with a hint of sadness. But this is a path I never imagined he would take. Eri and Kota, watching the screens with wide eyes, were both proud and slightly apprehensive. Papa looks so strong, Eri said, her voice filled with awe. But he looks different. Kota nodded, his cheeks flushed. Yeah, Dad's amazing. But scary. The survival challenge, initially intended as a test of skill and resilience, had become a profound exploration of human nature, a clash of contrasting cultures, and a revealing examination of the students' true selves. The boys, driven by their instincts and guided by Izuku's leadership, had embraced a primal existence, thriving in their newfound tribalism. The girls, trapped by their pride and their inability to cooperate, were facing a descent into despair. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a clash of cultures that would determine their ultimate fate. Chapter 8, The Beast, the Battle, and the BLD. The passing days continued to sculpt the boys' existence on the island. Their camp was a testament to their resilience, their bodies honed by constant LBR, and their spirits forged in the crucible of survival. Even small changes were becoming noticeable. Izuku, for instance, had begun to sport the faint beginnings of facial hair. Without shaving cream or a proper razor, a rough stubble was starting to shadow his jawline, adding to his increasingly rugged appearance. One afternoon, as a heavy rain began to fall, turning the clearing into a muddy expanse, a terrifying roar shattered the relative peace. A massive bear, its fur matted and dripping, lumbered into the camp, its eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. Panic erupted. The boys, caught off guard, scrambled for safety, their stone spears proving inadequate against the sheer size and power of the beast. They retreated into the cave, their sanctuary now a refuge from the raging storm and the ferocious predator. The bear, its claws tearing at the cave entrance, seemed determined to follow. The boys huddled deep within, their hearts pounding in their chests, their fear palpable. But then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Izuku, his crocodile skull mask gleaming in the dim light, his crocodile skin robe clinging to his damp form, stepped forward. In one hand, he gripped a stone spear, its point sharpened to a deadly edge. His eyes, usually filled with kindness, now burned with a fierce determination. "Stay back," he commanded, his voice low and firm. "I'll handle this." He charged. The confrontation was brutal and primal. The bear, its roars echoing through the clearing, swiped at Izuku with its massive claws. Izuku, agile and quick, dodged and weaved, his spear moving and parrying. The rain intensified, turning the ground into a treacherous mud pit. The fire, though still burning, flickered and sputtered, casting eerie shadows that danced with the combatants. But Izuku did not falter. He gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing in pain and resolve. He continued his attack, his movements relentless. The bear, wounded but enraged, reared up on its hind legs, its massive form towering over Izuku. It seemed poised to crush him with its immense weight. But Izuku was ready. With a final surge of strength, he raised his stone spear high above his head. As the bear lunged forward, he moved the spear downwards, its point piercing the bear's chest with a sickening thud. The bear roared in agony, its powerful body shuddering. It stumbled, its eyes glazing over, and then collapsed to the ground, its life blood staining the mud. Silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the sound of the pouring rain. The boys emerged from the cave, their faces pale with shock and relief. They rushed to Izuku's side, their voices filled with concern. "Deku. Midoriya. Are you okay?" Izuku, his chest heaving, his face pale but resolute, nodded weakly. "I'm fine," he rasped, his hand clutching his bleeding chest. The boys, their fear replaced by a surge of admiration and gratitude, carefully helped him back to the cave. They retrieved their limited medical supplies and tended to his wounds, their movements gentle and efficient. "Those are deep," Sato said, his voice filled with concern as he examined the gashes. "They'll leave scars." "It doesn't matter," Izuku replied, his voice hoarse. "We're all safe. That's what matters." Kirishima, his eyes filled with awe, presented Izuku with the iron knife. "You deserve this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." Izuku accepted the knife, its weight heavy in his hand. He used it to carefully gut the bear, its flesh providing a much-needed source of protein. The boys worked together to prepare the meat, their movements subdued but purposeful. On the girls' island, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the other side, the girls slept soundly, their dreams undisturbed by the raging storm or the primal battle that had been fought. In the observation room, the atmosphere was electric. The UA staff, the pro-heroes, the Big Three, and Eri and Kota watched the events unfold with a mixture of horror, fascination, and profound respect. My God, Nizu breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Midoriya-kun, he faced that beast head-on. He's incredible. Aizawa, his face uncharacteristically pale, stared at the screen in stunned silence. That was reckless, he finally managed to say, his voice barely audible. But undeniably brave. Present Mike was practically speechless. I don't even know what to say, he stammered. That was beyond manly. That was heroic. The wild pussycats were a mixture of horrified and impressed. He could have been killed. Mandalay exclaimed, her voice trembling. That was insane. But he did it, Pixie Bob added, her eyes wide with awe. He protected them. He's amazing. Mirko, however, found a strange sense of exhilaration in the violence. That's how you fight, she said, her voice husky with admiration. No holding back. No hesitation. Ryukyu, her expression thoughtful, observed Izuku's actions with a mixture of concern and respect. He's willing to sacrifice himself for others, she said. That's the mark of a true hero. Nijire, however, was completely captivated by Izuku's ferocity and his unwavering courage. He's a warrior, she whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. He's everything I never knew I wanted. The other female heroes in the room shared Nijire's reaction. Midnight, Ryukyu, and even Mirko felt a strange pull towards Izuku's newfound primal energy and his unwavering selflessness. All Might, his expression a mixture of pride and anguish, watched Izuku's battle with a heavy heart. Young Midoriya, he said, his voice filled with emotion. He's always been a hero at heart. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. Eri and Koda, watching the screen with wide eyes, were both terrified and awestruck. Papa got hurt. Eri cried, her voice trembling. Is he going to be okay? Koda nodded, his cheeks flushed. Yeah, Dad's strong. He'll be okay. He's a hero. The survival challenge, initially intended as a test of skill and resilience, had become a profound exploration of human nature, a clash of contrasting cultures, and a revealing examination of the students' true selves. The boys, driven by their instincts and guided by Izuku's unwavering courage, had faced a primal threat and emerged victorious, albeit with scars to bear. The girls, oblivious to the drama unfolding on the other side, remained trapped in their CYCL of disarray. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a clash of cultures that would determine their ultimate fate. Chapter 9, The Reckoning, The Realm, and the Return. The drone returned once more, its buzzing a herald of the end. Attention, students, Principal Nizu's voice announced, carrying a note of finality. The survival challenge has concluded. Prepare for extraction. The staff and several guests are en route to your locations. A mix of emotions washed over the students. Relief, anticipation, and for some, a gnawing sense of dread. The girls, huddled around their dwindling fire, exchanged nervous glances. The boys, their tribal community a well-oiled machine, prepared to greet their visitors with a quiet confidence. The vessel arrived at the girls' island first, a sleek UA transport ship cutting through the turquoise waters. Aizawa, Nizu, All Might, the wild pussycats, Ryukyu, Mirko, Midnight, the Big Three, Eri, and Koda disembarked, their expressions a mixture of professional assessment and personal concern. The sight that greeted them was underwhelming. A small, haphazard collection of lean-tos, a barely smoldering fire, and a general air of disarray. The girls, looking gaunt and disheveled, stood huddled together, their initial bravado replaced by a weary resignation. Nizu, his usual cheerfulness subdued, addressed them first. Class 1A girls, he began, his voice carrying a hint of disappointment. Let us discuss your performance. Aizawa stepped forward, his gaze stern. Your primary failing was the lack of organization and leadership. You prioritized individual desires over collective needs. Basic survival tasks such as shelter, fire, and consistent water procurement were neglected due to infighting and a refusal to follow a unified plan. The pro-heroes echoed his sentiments. You relied too heavily on the assumption that your quirks would always be there, Mandalay said, her voice gentle but firm. Without them, you lacked the fundamental skills and the teamwork necessary to thrive. You spent too much time talking about your feelings and not enough time taking action, Mirko stated bluntly, her ears twitching with impatience. Survival isn't a therapy session. There was a distinct lack of initiative and problem-solving, Ryukyu added, her expression thoughtful but critical. You waited for solutions to appear instead of actively seeking them. Even Eri and Kota, their faces etched with concern, couldn't offer any words of praise. They had witnessed the girls' struggles firsthand through the monitors. The girls stood in silence, their heads bowed, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. The stark reality of their performance, laid bare by the observers, was a harsh blow to their pride. They were loaded onto the ship, a somber group, their earlier boasts about outperforming the boys now a distant and embarrassing memory. As the ship sailed towards the boys' island, a nervous anticipation filled the air. The girls, clinging to a sliver of hope, whispered amongst themselves. Maybe the boys did even worse, Mina said, her voice barely a whisper. They're so reckless. Yeah, Ochiko agreed weakly. They probably ran into trouble without their quirks. As the ship approached the boys' island, the scene that unfolded before them was nothing short of astonishing. Lining the beach, standing tall and proud, were the boys of Class 1A. Each one wore a meticulously crafted goat skull mask and rugged animal skin garments, holding sharpened stone spears. They looked like a tribe of formidable island warriors. As the ship drew closer, the boys parted ranks, revealing Izuku at the forefront. He stood a little apart, his figure imposing in the crocodile skull mask and robe, the scars on his chest a visible testament to his battle. Before anyone could speak, Eri and Kota, their eyes wide with excitement and relief, darted forward, their small legs carrying them swiftly across the sand. Papa! Eri cried. Dad! Kota echoed, a shy but heartfelt exclamation. Izuku knelt down immediately, his imposing figure softening as he embraced the two children tightly. Eri! Kota! You're here, he said, his voice filled with warmth. He ruffled their hair, a genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes despite the mask. He then rose, his gaze meeting the stunned expressions of the observers. He gestured towards the interior of the island, his movements carrying a quiet authority. The boys followed his lead, parting to allow the UA staff, the pros, and the big three to pass through a newly constructed wooden gate. The sight that greeted them inside was breathtaking. A well-organized camp lay before them, a testament to industry and cooperation. Sturdy wooden structures stood amongst the trees, a thriving farm yielded crops, and a dedicated kitchen area bustled with signs of recent activity. Dried meat and fish were stored meticulously, and the massive bear skull, mounted above the entrance to the large cave, served as a stark reminder of their trials. Izuku led them into the cave, which opened into a surprisingly spacious stronghold. At the far end, a makeshift throne, crafted from sturdy branches and animal skins, sat elevated. Izuku settled onto the throne, Eri and Kota immediately clambering onto his lap, their presence adding a touch of domesticity to the primal scene. The female heroes present, Mirko, Midnight, Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, Nijire, and Ryukyu, all found themselves intensely aware of Izuku's presence. The skull mask, the scars, the air of command, coupled with the tenderness he showed towards Eri and Kota, created a potent and undeniably attractive combination. Blushes bloomed on several faces as they tried to reconcile this rugged leader with the shy boy they once knew. Nizu surveyed the camp with wide-eyed admiration. Remarkable, he exclaimed, his voice filled with genuine amazement. Absolutely remarkable. You have not only survived, but you have thrived. Aizawa nodded slowly, his usual stoicism finally cracking. Your organization, your resourcefulness, your teamwork, it's exemplary. You faced challenges head-on and built a functioning community. All Might stepped forward, a wide, proud smile on his face. "Young Midoriya," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I have never been prouder. You have shown true heroic spirit, not through flashy quirks, but through courage, intelligence, and the ability to inspire others." The pro-heroes echoed their praise, marveling at the boy's ingenuity and their unwavering determination. The Big Three, equally impressed, peppered the boys with questions about their survival techniques and their construction methods. The girls, witnessing this scene of triumph and praise, stood in stunned silence. The reality of their failure, juxtaposed with the boys' extraordinary success, was a crushing blow. Their earlier assumptions of superiority had been shattered, replaced by a dawning realization of their own shortcomings. As the sun began to set, the boys efficiently packed up their belongings, their tools, their crafted items, even their skull masks and animal skins, each item a memento of their transformative experience. They loaded everything onto the transport ship, their movements coordinated and purposeful. With the boys and girls safely aboard, the ship turned its course back towards UA. The journey was quiet, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. The boys, though tired, carried an air of quiet triumph. The girls, humbled and introspective, grappled with the lessons they had learned, or rather, failed to learn, on their isolated island. The survival challenge had ended, leaving behind a profound impact on all who had participated and observed. The boys had discovered a primal strength and a capacity for leadership they never knew they possessed. The girls had been forced to confront their reliance on their quirks and the consequences of their disunity. And the observers had witnessed a stark demonstration of the fundamental qualities of survival and the unexpected emergence of a true leader in the most challenging of circumstances. The return to UA would mark not just the end of an exercise, but the beginning of a new chapter in their journey as heroes. Chapter 10, Confessions, Cuddles, and the cruise home. The journey back to UA was a study in contrasts. The boys, despite their exhaustion, radiated a quiet sense of accomplishment, their camaraderie even stronger after their shared trials. The girls, on the other hand, remained subdued, the weight of their failure hanging heavy in the air. It was Eri who broke the silence, her innocent curiosity cutting through the somber atmosphere. She sat on Izuku's lap, her gaze fixed on the group of female heroes who had been observing them intently throughout the challenge: Mirko, Midnight, Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, Nijire, and Ryukyu. She turned her wide, innocent eyes to Izuku and pointed a small finger. "Papa," she asked, her voice clear and carrying across the deck, "are they our mommies?" A wave of stunned silence washed over the ship. Izuku's face flushed crimson, his ears burning. The 7 women Eri had pointed to reacted even more dramatically, their faces erupting in a symphony of blushes, ranging from a delicate pink to a deep, embarrassed scarlet. Koda, who was sitting quietly beside Izuku, peeked up at the commotion, his own cheeks turning a light shade of pink. The boys erupted in a chorus of teasing whistles and good-natured ribbing. "Ooh la la, Midoriya!" Kaminari exclaimed, nudging Izuku with a playful grin. "Looks like you've got a fan club." "Way to go, Deku!" Kirishima added, giving him a thumbs up. "Manly." Bakugo simply smirked, a rare hint of amusement in his crimson eyes. The female heroes in question were a mess of flustered denials and stammered explanations, their professional composure completely shattered by Eri's innocent question. What? No." Midnight stammered, fanning herself dramatically. "Eri-chan, that's not quite right," Mandalay said, her cheeks still flushed. "She's just a sweet kid, Midoriya," Pixie Bob added quickly, avoiding eye contact. Nijire, however, seemed to be taking it the hardest, her face a vibrant shade of red as she fidgeted nervously. Izuku, despite his embarrassment, tried to defuse the situation. "Eri, they are our friends. Very important friends." But Eri, with the unwavering logic of a child, tilted her head. "But they look at you like you're special." That innocent observation seemed to break the dam. One by one, the 7 women found themselves unable to contain their feelings any longer. It was Nijire who spoke first, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a nervous earnestness. Midoriya-kun, she began, her voice trembling slightly, ever since we first met I've always admired your kindness, your determination, your strength. Especially after seeing you on the island I have feelings for you. Her blush deepened as she confessed. Then, Ryukyu, usually so composed, admitted, Midoriya, your selflessness and your courage on that island were truly inspiring. I find myself drawn to your strength and your gentle heart. Midnight, regaining some of her composure, leaned forward with a sultry smile, though her cheeks still held a hint of pink. Well, Midoriya, you've certainly blossomed into quite the captivating young man. I've always had a soft spot for a hero in the making. Mirko, surprisingly, was the most direct. Deku, she said, her gaze intense, you're strong. You're determined. You don't back down. I like that. A lot. Mandalay, her voice soft but sincere, added, your protectiveness towards Eri and Kota, your unwavering commitment to others, it's truly admirable, Midoriya-kun. I've grown to care for you deeply. Pixie Bob, her usual playful demeanor replaced by a genuine tenderness, confessed, you're sweet, you're brave, and you have a way with kids that's just adorable. I have feelings for you too, Izuku. Ragdoll, her energetic movements momentarily still, simply nodded, her gaze filled with a quiet affection. Izuku, completely overwhelmed by this sudden outpouring of affection, could only stammer, his face an even deeper shade of red. I don't know what to say, he looked at each of them, his green eyes wide with surprise and a dawning sense of happiness. He had always admired these strong, incredible women. The thought that they might feel the same way about him was both exhilarating and terrifying. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. I like all of you too, he admitted, his voice a little shaky but sincere. You're all amazing, strong, and kind. If you're serious then yes. I would like to try dating all of you. A collective gasp of delight filled the air. The 7 women, their initial embarrassment forgotten, beamed at Izuku, their faces radiant. Before Izuku could fully process what he had just agreed to, he found himself engulfed in a flurry of hugs. Mirko's strong arms wrapped around him, followed by Midnight's sultry embrace, Mandalay's gentle hug, Pixie Bob's enthusiastic squeeze, Ragdoll's energetic jump hug, Nijire's excited embrace, and Ryukyu's warm and comforting hold. Eri and Kota, giggling with delight, joined the cuddle pile, their small arms wrapping around Izuku's legs. The boys cheered, their initial teasing replaced by genuine happiness for their friend. Way to go, Midoriya. Kirishima roared, clapping him on the back. You're a legend. The girls, still subdued by their defeat, watched the heartwarming scene with a mixture of surprise and a flicker of envy. He's really popular, Uraraka murmured, a hint of sadness in her voice. Yeah, Jiru added, crossing her arms. Guess he's not so useless after all. As the ship continued its journey back to UA, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The boys celebrated their victory and their leader's newfound romantic entanglements. The girls began to reflect on their mistakes and the valuable lessons they had, hopefully, learned. And in the center of it all, Izuku found himself surrounded by affection, a bewildered but happy smile on his face, holding his 2 surrogate children close, the start of a very unconventional romantic journey just beginning. The survival challenge had ended, but the ripples of its impact would continue to shape their lives in unexpected and profound ways.